Hello there, Kia ora. Yesterday, I mentioned that we should probably be keeping an eye out for sleight of hand tricks from this government when it comes to announcements around the budget. They're designed to look good or to get people worked up, and they hide the truth in really interesting ways. And then over the last couple of days, we've actually had some really interesting examples of that pop up. Like, David Seymour's $153 million for charter schools, which doesn't take into account individual student funding that the Ministry of Education would still have to provide, which is going to work out to be about $1,200 per student per year. So that's going to mean a lot more funding for charter schools that wasn't actually in his announcement. Yeah. But the one I wanted to talk to you about today is actually Kainga Ora. You see, this is an interesting area because there's a lot of history behind this. We as a country kind of have built into our psyche an understanding that there is always going to be a need for state social housing. And there has been since 1937 when the first state house in its modern form was built. And that's a long time to have that as part of who we are as a country. And the National Party knows it does not play very well with the electorate and with voters to come in to be seeing to dismantle that system, which we see as a cornerstone to our social infrastructure. But it didn't stop them in the 1950s from coming in and selling off state houses, or coming back in 1991 and increasing rents to market value, which really impacted state house tenants poorly. Or in the early 2010s, when the last national government decided that state housing should actually turn a profit instead of just being a social good service. So you can see that the National Party has a bit of history with bad blood and social housing. So they had to be really, really careful to ensure that whatever it is that they choose to do in the budget around Kainga Ora was going to be justified in the eyes of the electorate. And there's been a bit of a gaslighting campaign to get here. For example, back earlier in the year, they apparently found a report that said that the last government was looking at selling off something like $6 billion worth of property, about 10,000 homes, which it turned out was actually commissioned by Nicola Willis, not by the last Labour government. And it was actually put together with a whole bunch of other suggestions around revenue raising for the organisation because nothing had been given to them around their funding coming into this year and going into the future after the budget. Don't forget, this was Nicola Willis's detailed line-by-line financial plan. So they put together this report as requested. But that was used as an impetus to get on board Sir Bill English so he could write up this report. Now, don't forget, Bill English was the person who actually built the constructions in place for the last national government to try and turn a profit from social housing. So you've already got somebody who has history and who has a specific bias in this field. And what a shock. His report found that they're not making a profit and that they should be really, really concerned about the financial mismanagement of Kainga Ora, completely race the board, and change its structure, which didn't get much in the way of media coverage. At the moment, Kainga Ora is a government agency, which means it's set up to do a role for government that's kind of needed within society. They want to change it to a company, which means it needs to be profit-driven. Still answerable to the government is the shareholder, but profit becomes the main focus. It's also a lot easier to sell off companies than it is social agencies, but hey, when's a national government ever sold off things that the public didn't want them to sell off? Anyway, there was a whole bunch of really interesting information that came out with this particular report. Like you might have seen this particular graph that came up on One News. Well, there's a whole bunch of information missing from this, okay? For a start, we can see what the debt levels are, absolutely, but we can only see what the asset value is for the current year. The asset value level for 2020 or 2018 is still significantly higher than the debt level, same as it is now. And what we do know about the debt level in 2028 is that we don't really know what the asset value is going to be at that point in time to be able to justify it. But we do know that the predictions that they had put in place saw a debt level decrease by the year 2060 to only $9 billion. That's significantly lower with a huge amount of assets involved. That doesn't sound like financial mismanagement at all. Also, it should be pointed out that missing from this graph is the actual numbers behind how many houses and properties were there. They own houses in Kainga Ora and they lease houses as well. And it went from 62,000 to 74,000 properties in that time frame between 2018 and 2024. That's a huge increase. And right now, there's at least 2,000 houses that are sitting there not getting built, completely unfinished, while this organization tries to work out what the next step is. So the whole thing has been set up to look like it is, in their own words, a bombshell. But the reality is, they set up this narrative really specifically to try and push whatever change it is that they want to make, that they want to put in place, that they feel is necessary to make sure that Kainga Ora can basically be carved up for pieces if it doesn't make them money, but not get people upset at them at the same time.